Good afternoon. I'm not walking today because I went swimming earlier and I have chores, both for my law firm and for the farm. But I couldn't help but wonder about how we get into these terribly frightening death-like tragedies and whether we couldn't have avoided them. And I'm talking about, of course, the hurricane in Florida. And to be a hurricane, you have to be traveling at more than 75 miles an hour. And they rank the hurricanes, I believe it's 1 to 5. And the current one is a 4. And the hurricanes from 1 to 2 are shrinking, and the ones that are 4s and 5s have increased 30%, corresponding to the degree centigrade of anthropogenic global warming. And that's going back to 1975. So when we say anthropogenic, we're saying that it's man-caused global warming. Now, we've been telling the saged citizens, I prefer that we call them sage and mix it with age, because there's enough ageism in America so that we should not be indelicate when talking about the wisdom body of the older years of people who've experienced what goes on in a lifetime. And these older citizens want to stay in their home. They want to be connected to where they get their prescriptions. They want to stay in the house that they know, and if it goes, they believe, so will their life be compromised in the best case. So we tell them, don't stay in place, get out of there. Now, what if between 1975 and now we had done anything about the warnings involving global warming? If we had done anything. Because what global warming has done is it's made the hurricanes stronger and more destructive. The warm air holds more water, so we get more water. The waters of the earth have risen with the destruction of glaciers and ice around the planet. And it's only going to get worse. And we haven't done anything from 1975 to now. And I've mentioned, because she made such an impression on me, this brilliant lady from Barnard. We were talking about this in 1971, 72. And somebody told her that this was the problem with global warming. And she immediately felt like it was an imminent emergency and we had to do something. And why weren't we doing anything? And so on. That was then. And here we are now, and we haven't done that much. We give a lot of lip service. We say we're going to do things. We say this other nation state is not doing as much. And so the question is, are we at the tipping point? James Hansen, who's with NASA, has talked for years about this. And he gave an affidavit in a case I handled with the community to stop pipelines coming from West Virginia through Virginia, Maryland, and points north. And it was an ensemble production. We all cooperated, and we worked very hard. And I invited, pleaded, asked, hoped that Mr. Hansen, Dr. Hansen, would give us an affidavit in support of the proposition that this pipeline should be avoided because we shouldn't be increasing the use of fossil fuels. And the key point in his description was that the use of fossil fuels, we never know when we get the tipping point beyond which we can never recover. Now, Florida is a point in case in which little has been done. And so here we are, like we handle other tragedies. We know somebody's going to shoot a child, but we just don't do the things that would help avoid it. We have terrorists that tried to commit a coup in our country, and we jawbone, but we don't act upon it. We've had premonitions, reports, studies, and then concrete, objective evidence of what happens from global warming. So the way I see it, that the people who are stranded and hurt and those who die in this hurricane, they die because we did nothing, or nothing effective, or little if at all. And that state's headed by a man who would be the President of the United States, the governor, DeSantis. And this is the problem with our leadership. We talk about ages gone by when we could do the impossible. We could do anything, and we're not. And consider the coverage if you're listening to any of it. The coverage is about what we're doing today that we failed to do that could have minimized what we are doing and have to do today. We are trying to evacuate people. We're trying to keep them safe. We're trying to, doing emergency action. And I heard one of the people who's working on this saying, well, we got ahead of this. We knew 6 days ago. That's not the question. What were you doing 6 years ago? What were you doing 12 years ago, 20 years ago? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So my heart goes out to those people in Florida who are suffering this terrible crisis. And I condemn those who've done not a thing about global warming, except run it down and pretend that glaciers aren't melting, that the airs are not holding more water because of the warmth, that they move these hurricanes more slowly across the earth because of the effect of global warming. There are studies that say all of this, and we're witnessing it right now. If this was gun violence, somebody would say, well, don't talk about that. Now you're playing politics with the fact that people are stranded and suffering and perhaps even dying in Florida because of a hurricane when we had done nothing that might or might not have made a difference today. And maybe it's too late, which is the really sad part of it. So I felt I needed to talk about it myself, and I find it aggravating that in the coverage of this crisis, I haven't heard a word of anybody saying, they prefer the word climate change instead of global warming, but the change is warming, and that's the reason it's a problem. It's like we're handled by the words. Oh, it's changing. Which way is it changing? Oh, I don't know. Well, it's pretty obvious how it's changing. And we've had enough data points. Go to Texas, go to New Orleans, go to the west side of Florida, go up and down the coast. There'll be water in the streets of New York as this continues over the years ahead. So it's an observation unless we can get the government to move. And even this administration, which I support, Biden, they talk about dealing with global warming, but then they say, well, okay, let's release the fuel. Let's have pipelines travel across the country, because Manchin wants that as a trade-off for whatever he did earlier, instead of preventing the Democratic caucus from passing legislation that was necessary. So that's a pretty sad rundown from my perspective. And it's not just my perspective. I'm really a conduit for studies, scientific studies that demonstrate what I say. So I'm talking to you from a back deck at my house before I'm summoned into the field to deal with our animals in the latter part of the day. Again, think of those poor people in Florida, and think about how the politicians and leaders are failing us, and the commentators are minimizing how this occurs. This doesn't occur in a vacuum. The people in Puerto Rico know it didn't occur in a vacuum. The people in Florida, many of them, they know it didn't occur in a vacuum. But we have been piping to them nonsense about the fact that, global warming is uncertain, and that we humans don't contribute to it. Really? Well, that's the story. So it's nice visiting with you. Sorry to share my perspective, but I don't hear it said anyplace else. And you do a service to those people who are suffering in Florida by mentioning it to others. All the best. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.